Welcome to Radical Personal Finance, a show dedicated to providing you with the knowledge, skills, insight, and encouragement you need to live a rich and meaningful life now while building a plan for financial freedom in 10 years or less. Today on the podcast, I'm going to share with you some ideas about building a great year for the new year, 2026. Every year for the past few years, I've talked about New Year's resolutions, talked about goal setting, and I have a unique perspective that I believe you will find valuable. I have a unique perspective in that I speak with and I coach a significant number of high-performance people. I'm not Tony Robbins, but I have a unique perspective from speaking with, on an intimate level, high-performance people. And that has deeply influenced my life and given me some ideas that I want to share with you about the areas that I think the majority of people, I would reckon about 80% of people listening to my podcast, where you're going to wind up. And I think that if you'll listen to the ideas that I have to share with you in this particular podcast, I can save you years of hard work trying to figure some stuff out for yourself. So sit back, relax. This is the show that I wish someone had played for me a number of years ago, and I will now record that for you. But first, I want to share with you about an idea that may impact you significantly in this next year, which is quite simply for one of your goals and one of your resolutions to be getting smarter. I want you to think about how you can get smarter this year. Now, there's two levels in which we can think about getting smarter. We can think about it on the becoming more well-informed or that was too many, more well-informed, becoming well-informed or more informed. In general, there's kind of a colloquial way that we use to express intelligence, which means somebody who is conversant in a number of different fields, somebody who has a broad degree of general knowledge. So that might be an expression of it. Or another expression of it might be simply increasing your personal intellectual horsepower. And I think either one of those would be good approaches for you. If you'd like to be more well-informed this year, I would encourage you to just think about some of the subjects that you're interested in and practice I forgot the numbers. I used to call it the 10-3-3. I stole that from Darren Hardy. I don't recall. It's something like the 10-3-3-1 series where you decide something that you want to get smarter about this year. And so you go on Amazon and you buy 10 books and you subscribe to 3 podcasts and 3 YouTube channels and sign up for 1 conference or something like that. I stole it from him and now I've forgotten what I stole from him. But basically, that's one way of getting smarter. It's becoming more well-informed on subjects that are of interest to you. And this is something that I think you should do. You can, in a shockingly short amount of time, become well-informed on a variety of issues. It may take thousands of hours to master a particular domain, but man, with 10 to 20 hours, you can cover a lot of ground. In 10 to 20 hours, you can be conversant and knowledgeable and well-informed on almost anything that you're interested in. So that's one thing to do. Another thing you can do, though, is you can work on increasing your own personal intellectual horsepower. How much raw material is there to work? And you can exercise your brain this year. Now, there's a lot of debate about the question of, can I increase my IQ or can I adjust? Can I actually increase things? And my answer to that question is, I don't know. It seems like some things are influential, but a lot of the things that are the most influential seem to be about limiting the downside. So it's much easier as I understand the science, it's much easier for us to make sure that a population is not made up of stupid people than it is for us to make a population full of really smart people. So things like iodine supplementation, one of the most important things for you to make sure that you do, and that you and your children and people that you know, is you have proper iodine consumption. One of the most effective, let me not say what I don't know, one of the most effective interventions in public health has been iodine supplementation. Putting it in the salt and making sure that people consume that is a really, really good way of making sure you don't have stupid people. Avoiding poisons, lead poisoning, and all the other things that impact IQ. That's all really, really well evidenced, that we can keep people from being dumb if we can make sure they have the proper nutrients to not be dumb. Now, can we make people smart? Well, we don't know. That's much in debate. What does seem to have evidence, as far as I can tell, is that we can adjust and change the brain if we will exercise it. And there are a few things that are consistently associated with this kind of evidence. So one of the things is exercise, physical exercise. So if this year you undertake an exercise regimen where you're out walking or you're hiking or you're running or you're lifting weights, all of those things are really good for brain health, in making sure that you have a good and healthy brain, because the brain needs the blood flow. So lots of blood flow to the brain from physical exercise that will make you smarter. By the way, I should have mentioned this. One of the things that you need to avoid is you need to avoid damaging the brain. And so the other big damage, in addition to nutrients, is just physical injury. So minimizing the risks of traumatic brain injury is really, really key. Some of the key things to do that: make sure you wear your helmet when you're engaging in activities where you could fall down and hit your head. Try to minimize things where you hit your head. So make certain, for example, playing soccer, don't do one of the things that always pains me when I was in Brazil this past year for a few months. The Brazilians are incredible, and they have this sport. I don't know what they call it, but it's soccer volleyball, where they use a soccer ball and they play it on a volleyball court. But instead of playing volleyball the way that I play volleyball with my hands, they play it with soccer rules. So you only kick the ball over or you use your head. That is so destructive that you are stupid if you play that sport. You are admiringly stupid. You look really cool and sexy on the beach playing it, but you are destroying your brain if you are heading a soccer ball that much. So try to work with your children that if your children are playing sports like soccer, make sure that they do not engage in a lot of bumping the ball with their head, and help them to wear helmets, things like that, because you want to avoid traumatic brain injury. These injuries, they're cumulative. You can have a severe injury, but you can also have cumulative injuries to your brain. So take good care of your brain. All right, back to the building your brain. There are a number of activities that are highly associated with increasing intelligence. And so one of those activities, things like music. Music has a certain effect on the brain. A good one is languages, learning another language. Similar things like mathematics and engaging in these kinds of things. So dance, physical movement, art, music, painting, learning piano, learning another language, and doing things like mathematics are all part of increasing the brain. And what will happen is that your brain will actually physically adapt to these things. Now, what I don't know is, does learning music cause you to be better at math? I don't know. In general, the things that you want to be better at, you should just study them. But what there does seem to be good evidence of is that if you will make your brain stronger, it can have benefits over time. So there's two of these that are, of course, of personal interest to me, and they are languages and mathematics. I've been sharing with you about the math company that I own now, and I want you to engage in that. And I want you to engage in math for yourself and also for your children. What I love about mathematics is I believe that mathematics can be for the brain like a barbell is for the body. If you talk to somebody who is a weightlifting coach, what is incredible about a barbell is that it is infinitely titratable. What I mean is that you can bring in a weak, frail, 92-year-old woman, and you can start having her do barbell exercises, and she can have enormous improvements over time, because you can take the barbell and you can drop it down to a weight that is appropriate to her. It might be 12 pounds, and she's learning how to squat with 12 pounds. And then you can go up with half-pound weights when she's increasing it, and you can adjust the load perfectly for her so that each and every day she has to increase her total work output, and that increases her muscles. And 6 months later, she can be transformed. Some of my favorite genre of videos is weightlifting coaches who work with older people who are weightlifting for the first time in their 80s and their 90s. And it's incredible the transformations that they have. However, you could take that exact same barbell and you can find some 26-year-old dude with muscles popping out everywhere. And you can perfectly use that same tool, and you can home in the same exercise, and you can put a weight on him that will have him huffing and puffing and will cause the muscular adaptation that you're looking for. That's what's incredible about a barbell. So what is that for the human brain? Well, my friends, it's math. It's math. You can bring in a 5-year-old student and you can start teaching that 5-year-old math. And at the end of a week of doing math, that student will be smarter. And you can bring in a 75-year-old, PhD, 2 PhD, advanced postdoc work mathematician who's done math his whole life. And that guy can sit there and he can work on math, and he can do it in a way that's going to make him smarter. And the smarter you are at math and the better you are at math, the more you understand the world and the more you can intuit the world. And yet all you got to do is just show up and spend 10 or 15 minutes a day working on it. And so this has long been my ambition. I'm imperfect at it, but it is renewed. My ambition to spend 10 or 15 minutes a day doing math. And I'm going back and relearning all the math that I failed in, that I've forgotten. I didn't fail. I forgot. I'm learning all the math that I forgot from my past. And sometime in the coming years, I'm going to relearn calculus and I'm going to be good at it. So that is my suggestion to you, is that you consider doing that. Now, if you want a really fun and interesting way to do that, pick up some of my books from Life of Fred, the company that I own, lifeoffred.com. Amazing math books, take you all the way from 1+1 through a college undergraduate degree in mathematics. And I think that you'll enjoy reading the stories. You'll enjoy learning the concepts of mathematics because it's not just boring doing problems all over the same. So make yourself smarter in mathematics. The other thing that you can do is make yourself smarter in languages. Ironically, we know that languages is one of the things that is the most highly correlated with maintaining brain health over time and staving off the arrival of Alzheimer's and dementia. Now, I have never been able to figure out if this is causal or correlated. I don't know. But what we do know is that people who are multilingual, bilingual or multilingual, they maintain better brain health for longer. That and coffee. Keep drinking your coffee, I guess, if I understand correctly. So if you are monolingual, I would encourage you, make a plan to pick up a little bit more of a language. And what's amazing about language is that it's one of those things where knowing a little bit of a language can open up a whole lot of doors. I speak about 6 words of Chinese. I used to speak about 36 words of Chinese. I got some Pimsleur tapes years ago, and I went through the first section of the Pimsleur language program before I went to China, and I memorized the whole basic flow of the first Pimsleur tape, and then I went to China. You would not believe the fun I had with my 36 words of Chinese in a way that would have been totally inaccessible if I hadn't had those 36 words. And so language has enormous payoff. Learning 100 words, learning 1,000 words is enormously beneficial to you and to your knowledge of the world, to your understanding of the world, even if you're not fully fluent. And so pick up a habit of doing some language time. Now, again, as you know, I am building a new company. It's still in beta application. We're still working on the app, but echolingoapp.com is my new language company that I have begun to try to make language learning fun and enjoyable. And it's super simple. All you do is listen. You listen to me tell you stories, interesting stories in bilingual translation. And if you'll do that with me for somewhere between 100 to 200 hours this year, then by the end of this year, you'll be in a position to where you can jump over to target language only. And you can just listen to all the stuff that you like in Spanish or French or whatever you're into. And that will open up for you in 2027 and 2028. That will open up for you fluency. I've done this myself 4 or 5 times over. I know it works well, and it's fun, it's enjoyable. All you got to do is pick a language activity that you enjoy and then just do it. So if you're interested in the languages I currently have right now, and the beta version of my app are Spanish, Spanish, Portuguese, French, German, and Latin. If you are interested in any of those languages, check out my app. Otherwise, stay tuned. In the coming months, I'll be adding more languages, and we'll add in some of the other ones. It's just there's some challenges with the other ones that we're still working on making great. The app is still in beta. Big changes soon. So just recognize this is beta. So without me saying any numbers, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, if you're at all interested in this, you should move quickly. Go to echolingoapp.com, sign up for the beta. Echolingoapp.com is where you can find that information. All right. Continuing on. How was that ad? Did you guys enjoy that ad? I know it was a 12-minute ad, but I think it was kind of fun, right? There was some engaging education. I hope you liked that. One of my commitments is I have done a very bad job in the past of doing ads. I've been pathetic at it, and it's been embarrassing to me because I don't know why. I'll explain that in a different actually, I do know why. I'll explain in a different podcast, but I am not letting any content go out by me at all this year without ads, but I'll do my best to make them interesting and engaging for you, so I hope you enjoyed that ad. Lifeoffred.com, echolingoapp.com. All right, let's talk about the new year. In life, you are going to go through changes. It's probably necessary that you go through all of the phases of change. What I mean is, if you're 20 years old and you're talking to an 80-year-old, and the 80-year-old is telling you, hey, 20-year-old, here's where you're going to be at 80-year-old, it doesn't mean you get to skip all the time in the beginning. When I talk to young people, I tell them, hey, I've been where you're at. Here's where I'm at now. Here's the path that I have taken. And there's a good chance that if you're a thoughtful person with these values or these ambitions, you're going to go through something of a path like I have taken. I share that knowledge, but I don't expect them to be able to walk quickly down that path. Meaning I don't expect them to be able to skip that path. I remember for me, a notion that I had was when I had completed in my early 20s, when I had completed the full list of basically markers of adulthood. I had a college degree, I got married, I bought a house, I had a dog, and I had a baby. It was like the big five, right? This is how you know you're an adult. I remember that I felt different having done those things. And then with some of those things, I walked away from them. And there's some of those things where I couldn't do like that just not necessary, right? I went on, sold my house and moved into a car, right? An RV, a glorified car on wheels. And so that was fun. But if I hadn't bought the house, I wouldn't have experienced what it was like to own the house. And I would have felt like, maybe I just don't know what I'm missing. If I didn't have a college degree, I wouldn't know what it felt like to have a college degree, and I wouldn't have known what I was missing. And I don't think I would have listened to anybody who told me I didn't need to do those things, that there was something by ticking those boxes off that I learned something. But the reality is you can learn very fast. So you need to experience things in life sometimes, but you can experiencing those things quickly. You can live quickly. And that's what I have done, is I've lived quicker than other people. And by living faster, I think I've gotten further down the road faster than a lot of other people, which is really rewarding to me. Right? I turned 40 this past year. And as I reflected on my life, well, of course, there are many things that I have, that I would do differently. And if I could just wave my hands and magically change my life, there are things that I probably would change. We all would. But on the whole, I feel a deep sense of satisfaction for the decisions that I have made, and I would not change places with any of my peers that I know if I had to do it over again. Now, I hope that that is common, but let me explain to you why I felt that so consistently. I felt it because I believe I've done a good job of focusing on the things that can only be done at certain phases of life, not the things that can be done at any phase in life. I was most grateful for my children. I have lost a lot of money over the last decade from having children. The costs have been huge. I would be probably, I don't know. Okay, I might be richer today if I didn't have children than if I did. But when I look at my friends who are richer than me in money and poorer than me in love, I'm pretty confident I made the right decision. They can make the right decisions for them. I'm pretty confident I made the right decision. Because now, during this decade of my life, when it's unlikely that I'll be able to have any children, I can make money. Whereas all they have to do is make more money, and it's difficult for them to turn back the clock and have more children. And so I use that because I hope it's an example that a lot of us resonate with. There's a time in life in which you can have children, and yet there are many times in life in which you can make money. And so if we can get clear on what needs to be done at a certain time in life and make those big decisions well in the best time for them, then we can have more of a sense of satisfaction as the years go by. I don't have as much money today as I expected to have, but I'm satisfied with my decisions because of this perspective. So let's do what Mr. Covey always taught us to do, which is begin with the end in mind. And I want you to imagine yourself at the very end of your life. Where are you likely to be? And what will you value? What I have learned as the years go by, and what I have observed talking with a lot of people, is that you will not value any of the accomplishments that you have made that were purely based upon consumption or accumulation. The millionaire lying on his deathbed has about the same experience as the broke person lying on his deathbed, if we're talking about the money. The deathbed may be nicer, maybe fancier, but it's still a deathbed. What you will appreciate is the legacy that you have and the things you have overcome. The secret to healthy aging, I learned this from Dan Sullivan years ago. He says, the secret to healthy aging is that your future must always be bigger than your past. Your future must always be bigger than your past. And that is, as far as I'm concerned, one of the most profound bits of wisdom that is easy to understand and hard to apply, but yet if we can keep it in mind, we can make good decisions. So I imagine myself on my deathbed. The year is 2085, okay? I'm 115 years old, all right? And I'm lying on my deathbed at 115 years old, and I'm reflecting. The first thing that I want to always be focused on is I want to make certain that my future is bigger than my past. This is easy for me because I'm a Christian. So as a Christian, I know that my future will always be bigger than my past. That's the hope of Christianity, that death will not always be the impediment, will not always be the curse that it has been, and that I will have a role in the new heavens and the new earth. And when Christ builds the new earth, I want to be one of the lieutenants in that kingdom. I want to be building that. And so I will be on my deathbed, anxiously looking forward to that new reality. That's the first thing, is beginning with spiritual peace. If you don't have that, it's very hard to look forward to getting older, because after this, nothingness, right? It's kind of annoying. So I'd encourage you, begin with the end in mind. Be clear on what you expect from eternity. And by the way, I expect eternity to be filled with work, which I'm excited about. One of the changes that has happened for me in my theology is that over the years, when I was younger, I had this idea that the future place of believers was heaven. I no longer really believe that. It's not that I deny heaven, but I think the future place of believers is the new earth, and that I expect eternity to be much closer to this present experience of reality, of physical temporal reality, than harps and clouds and kind of the goofiness that is out there. But that's just my own conviction. So begin with the end in mind, think about your deathbed, and make certain that you have an eternal plan, because when you can do that, it's exciting. Now pull back from your deathbed. Pull back 5 or 10 years from your deathbed. Maybe me at 105. How am I going to make my future bigger than my past at age 105? How am I going to do that? Well, friend, it's obviously going to be hard. Right? Clearly hard. But I've known a lot of people, my grandparents, some of them did this very well. And the way that you do this well is by building, is by engaging in challenges that go beyond your lifetime. I've kind of buried the lead, so let me just get straight to it. One of the key things that will be helpful for you as you think about making your future bigger than your past is you focus on hard things, on challenges and on problems, rather than attaining things. This morning, I saw a little video of Jeff Bezos, and evidently he was in St. Bart's with his wife and sitting at a restaurant. And here was this little video. And what I'm always struck by in the modern age is that on the whole, the life of a billionaire is far more similar to my life than ever before in human history. If you were to go back a couple of centuries and you were going to compare the king of a country to a peasant in his country, their lifestyle was very different. But today, Jeff Bezos pretty much has about the same cell phone that I have. He pretty much has most of the same experience of life. His is finer, right? He has a private chef who cooks for him. He has a private airplane that gets him around the world. But there's not any significant difference between most of the luxuries of how he spends his time and his hours than I do. That's unique. That's new. That's fresh. So if you're rich, you're not going to find all that much joy in consumption, much more than the consumption thing kind of ends out, right? It becomes silly at a point. And I'll come back to the consumption goals in a moment. So what isn't? Well, my answer is it's usually going to be some element of solving problems. The most reliable goals that I have taken the greatest satisfaction in accomplishing have generally been goals related to solving a problem or doing something that required growth. If you can lay out for yourself a problem that you care about solving, and then you can engage in that process of solving the problem, and you do that consistently over time, the satisfaction that you have at the end is enormous, much more than the satisfaction of achieving a certain personal result, a personal goal. I'm not saying sorry, I spend so much time saying what I'm not saying, and one of my goals is to learn to be clear and a better communicator. It's good to have markers. It's good to celebrate things. I think it's good to buy fancy cars. It's great to go out to fancy dinners. It's great to buy a vacation home. It's great to have consumption. Great to apply to buy a jet. Okay. All of those things are pretty cool. I'm not opposed to consumption. I'm not lobbying here for just pure asceticism for some unknown reason. What I'm saying is that virtually all of those achievements that seem great or seem like they're going to be great, you will become accustomed to them in no time at all. When you go from poverty to wealth, you'll still be you. You'll have a different set of problems and a different set of worries, but you'll still be you. And is it better to be rich than it is to be poor? I think the answer is an unqualified yes, it is. But all of your problems don't magically disappear when you're rich. You still have them. Your relationships don't magically disappear when you have money. Like they're still there and they still have the basic problems. There's lots of evidence that I could muster to try to prove this point. I won't do it at this point, other than to say, why on earth do celebrities commit suicide if this is not true? I think the two most painful for me, most obvious, of course, many celebrity suicides. But for me, it's Anthony Bourdain and Robin Williams. If you think that achieving great heights of fame and acclaim are going to solve all your problems, how on earth do those two men off themselves and destroy everything? How do you get there? When you're broadly loved, you're broadly acclaimed, you have an interesting and exciting life. And of course, some of them had financial problems and various issues, but how do you get there? Now, it doesn't matter what you think the answer to that is. What matters is that the end result is the same, that fame and wealth and appreciation by others didn't solve the fundamental problems of humanity. And how is it that you've also known personally, not celebrities, but you've known people who lived little hidden lives in very humble circumstances, and you've known an old lady who toiled away in her kitchen and never really knew anybody beyond her neighborhood, but you go and sit down at her kitchen table, and she's just one of the happiest and most enjoyable, just lovely people that you know. And she seems contented with life, and what a treasure she is. We all have these experiences. And so when we set these goals, we need to recognize what role does the goal play. And in my experience, most of the goals that I have that are purely set around consumption are short-lived. If I can just achieve this, then I'm going to buy this other thing. And then you do it. And then you buy the thing. And the thing is cool for a day or a week. And after a day or a week, it's not as shiny as it was, and it doesn't last, doesn't endure. But when you do something that's hard and you improve as a human, you become better, then it causes you feel satisfaction from it because you know what was required to do it. And so where I always go, because I spend a lot of time talking to wealthy people who have all the money they're going to need for the rest of their life, etc., is I say, what problems would you like to solve in the world? And for the kind of people who are likely to be interested in building wealth and are likely to have the character to build wealth, which, for the record, is not all people. There are people who are of a radically different makeup, a radically different emotional temperament that's just different than you and me. But if you're still here listening to me, you and I are different from those people, right? What is likely to be the key for you and for me is to be engaged with some kind of quest, some kind of improvement, and some kind of problem that you want to see improved. That's where you're going to wind up. Don't take my word for me for it, but if I can collapse your search for that answer and from 10 years down to 2 years, then I'll feel good about it. If you need to chase the consumption thing for a couple of years, cool, go for it. But after you do it, you're going to wind up here. You're going to wind up working on a problem, because that is a way that you can engage and always make your future bigger than your past. And what happens with problem solving is that once you solve one problem, you build a little bit of problem-solving muscle. And then you look around and you say, well, I solved that problem. I wonder if I could solve a bigger problem. I solved that problem. I wonder if I could solve a bigger problem. And you go on. And there are different ways that this happens. For some people, it happens based upon the number of people they can solve the problems for. So you have some problem in your life, and you think, man, I'm having this issue. I'm going to fix this thing. And then you fix the thing. And then you're like, well, I fixed this thing. I wonder if I can help other people fix the thing. And you go out and you start preaching the gospel and you help people fix the thing. It's amazing. In other cases, people work on other problems that are just bigger problems. And so if you've solved one set of unsolved math problems, that kind of moves you on and you solve a bigger set of unsolved math problems, or at least you work on it. And then if you solve one engineering problem, you solve a bigger problem. You solve one corporate problem, you solve a bigger problem. You solve one political problem, you solve a bigger problem. And you're trying to build a culture. You're trying to build something where we can steadily go on and solve bigger and bigger problems. Friend, that's where you're going to wind up. So if that's true, what I want to encourage you here in the new year is just start thinking about the problems that you care about. Don't think, as I used to, don't think that, wow, if I can just accomplish this thing, my life is going to be just magically great. If I can just finally reach 7 figures net worth, my life is going to be magically great. Not the case. Not the case. Today, as I record this, I spoke to a client. This client was telling me the story. We were talking about money. This client, 40-something years old, $6.5 million net worth, almost 7, I think. He says, I just tell my wife the number's going to be $2.5 million, right? And then we hit $2.5 million. Oh, okay, it's not quite. That's going to be $5 million. Then we're going to be done. Like, well, then you hit $5 million and it's not there. Well, now you're at 7. And what happens is, ironically, for many people, when you're sitting at a $7 million net worth, you're recognizing, man, this just ain't very much money. Now, what I love to do is for that guy at 40 at 7, it's completely feasible that he'll be at $100 million net worth by the time he is an older man. That's a radically different order of magnitude set of problems, right? But you need to know where you're going. So what I'm trying to warn you about is to say that life is you're not going to be engaged deeply with the idea that it's not going to be super engaging to you for a very long time. But man, if I can just hit $1 million in net worth, that's going to be the key. Because by the time you reach $1 million in net worth, your vision is going to go out. Goals are like this, right? Whenever you reach a goal, there's always another new goal on the other side. And this never stops. And I talked about having children, right? I never set out to have a bunch of children. That was never a goal of mine. But as I had child, and I realized, hey, that was really great. Let's do that again. And then all of a sudden now I'm like, I've run out of time. I'd like to have a dozen children. It'll never happen. And so I think this kind of thing is just is natural, is that you reach something and our vision always exceeds our grasp. And so if that's where you're going to wind up, you're going to wind up with your goals changing, then we need a model that doesn't, where you're not deriving your happiness from the end goal, but rather from the process. And what I'm telling you is the process is going to be solving problems becomes who you are. And the more problems you can solve for the more people, you're going to have satisfaction in that because it's going to be better, because you're going to feel like your impact is bigger. And that's where you're going to wind up, is desirous of impact, desirous to leave the world a better place, the desire to be a good steward when you are called to account to God Himself for what you have done with the talents that He's given to you. That's what it is. It's burning within your heart. I want to be a good steward of these talents. And that, in my vernacular, is going to come with solving problems. When I look around, I look for problems to solve. I see a complete, there's a sin fin, right? In Spanish, you say sin fin, a never-ending list. There's a never-ending list of things that you can solve. And those problems, the cool thing about it, if you'll notice what I've said, is entirely subjective. If the problem that you want to solve is the fact that in our town we should have beautiful tall oak trees, well, that's perfectly good. It's just as good as me trying to solve a problem of let's help all the children of the world be multilingual. I think the average child can pretty easily learn 3 or 4 or 5 languages without too much difficulty. And the problem is just we don't have the right methodology. So I've built the methodology and I'm trying to solve that problem. You're going to solve the problem of oak trees in your city. And you believe that your grandchildren should inherit a world in which they live in a house with beautiful 50-foot tall oak trees. Well, go do it. Fix it. The number of problems in the world is infinite. And this is where you can apply your personality to it. But if you recognize that what I'm actually trying to do is look for problems, that's a much longer way to run. I'm 40 years old. I have not found an end to the number of problems that I have. I found an end to the number of solutions that I have. And so I'm keeping a list of problems that I care about that I don't have solutions for. But I think if I work on some of these for 20 or 30 or 50 years, I may not be able to solve them, but I may at least be able to light the way. Which brings me to the other element of it. How are you going to make your future bigger than your past? The answer is going to be by building a dynasty. By building a dynasty. Let's go back to the 105-year-old Joshua, not on his deathbed yet, but the 105-year-old Joshua. The way that the 105-year-old Joshua is going to be thinking about how to make his future bigger than his past is going to be through the people that are in his life. It's not going to be through his own effort. I'm not talking about eternity. I'm talking about this side of death. That there are 2 elements of looking forward into eternity. The first element is what I've already talked about, looking forward across the abyss, the valley that we can't quite see over. And we think there's something there. We think we're eternal beings having a temporal experience. And we think we have some idea of what that's like, but there's it's shrouded in mist. But if we come back to today, when we're about to cross over ourselves, we're going to be thinking about the people who are still here fighting, who are still here building, who are still here transforming. And what we want to do is we want to be those who are thinking multi-generationally. So I want to be thinking about the world that my great-grandchildren's great-grandchildren will inherit. In order to do that, I need to build a dynasty. The dynasty is the people that I'm able to engage with. Now, here again, just call Joshua your human guinea pig. This is something that I have come to somewhat recently. I spent years chasing down the path of ultimate freedom and independence. Well, I don't want to engage with people. After all, I've just messed all that up all the time, so I'll just go do my own thing. And I'm here to tell you, you're going to wind up very frustrated. I'll elaborate on that in a different podcast, but you're going to wind up frustrated like I was. And you're going to come back and you're going to realize at the end of my life, I want to use my wisdom and my experience to try to pave a pathway forward. Imagine that you're a physicist or a mathematician and you spend years working on something and you can't solve it. But you reach the end of your life and you're just kind of groping your way forward. And you're like, I think I can't solve this problem, but I think that there may be solutions in this area. But what you want to do is you want to pass it along. And you want to say, here, bright young physicist, I'm about to step off this mortal coil, but based upon my experience, here's my notes, here's what I've learned, and I think that if you'll progress down this area of research, you might find a solution in this area of research. That's what we're all looking for, is to pass along our wisdom and our experience, to not have wasted our lives, but to take our hard-won experience, our hard-won wisdom, and share it with the next generation. In order for you to do that, you've got to build your disciples. You've got to build your dynasty. And this happens in two basic ways. The most natural way is that it happens through your own loins, through your children, through your grandchildren, through your great-grandchildren. I noticed this years ago, okay? When I was younger, I watched there was the TLC show with the Duggar family, the 16 kids and counting, 18, whatever, all the children. And I watched at that time, this was years ago, Jim Bob Duggar. I watched him. And he obviously had made some money, and he was making money on the show, and he had some cool toys. I think at the time he had a bus and an RV, and I watched him or whatever. But I watched him with his children, and I came to the realization, I said, that man is one of the richest men in the world, because he will never in his life have a day in which he is not surrounded by humans that adore him. Imagine Jim Bob Duggar at 73 years old. He wants to go fishing. He's going to have dozens of little buddies that want to go fishing with him. And I thought about that. I grew up with a guy who was a good friend of mine growing up. I mean, he's dead now. I don't need to say his name, but he was a neighbor of mine. And this was an old man. And he was an old man. He lived on disability. And he was a wonderful friend to me. He would take me fishing. Now, what was ironic was that he and his wife, he had one son. He was one of 16 children. His wife was one of 17 children. Big Catholic families from Ohio, and they had one son. But his son was older, and my neighbor, he wanted to go fishing. But he would go by himself. That's what he did. He lived on disability. But then sometimes he would take me. And I didn't really see it clearly at the time, but I do see it now. Like, he invested a lot in me. He invested a lot in me because I was there. I was just a neighbor kid, and we'd go fishing. We'd go out to the orange groves, and we'd go catfishing with a cane pole out in the orange grove irrigation ditches. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't exotic, but that was what we did. And we had a good time. But I wasn't available all that much. And my neighbor could go fishing any day, but he didn't have that many fishing partners. And I don't know, just for whatever reason, I looked at Jim Bob Duggar when I was younger, and I said, he will always have fishing partners. He will always have little buddies, tons of grandchildren and probably great-grandchildren that want to be around him. Now compare him with Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger. Compare him with Jeff Bezos. Which one do you want to trade places with? I don't think you have to choose, by the way. This is a fake thing but my point is that before Charlie Munger died, Charlie was a treasure, national treasure. But he's an old man. And the fact that he's got billions of dollars doesn't seem all that much more useful than the fact that if he had some millions of dollars. And so you want to be thinking about what's the legacy. And I'm not dishonoring Munger. I'm not dishonoring Buffett. I'm not dishonoring any of these men because they can all build it. And that's the other way, is to build it sideways. But my point is that your dynasty, your legacy, your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren matter. It's important. Now, flip it out sideways. Let's assume that you don't have any children. You don't have any grandchildren. Well, you've got to adopt some. You've got to recognize that if you're not good at this, you're going to wind up old and alone. And so you better get busy and you better find some children and some grandchildren. And that's going to come with people that you're mentoring, people that you are bringing along, that you're training. And so if you are an old physicist and you've devoted your life to science, respect. You've got to be training the young physicists that come along. You've got to be mentoring them. You got to be investing into them. Because if you want your work and your ideas to go past your lifetime, then you're going to need to cultivate the people, the disciples who will continue forward. That's what you have to do. You have to replace yourself. And that's not easy. It's going to take years. It's going to take decades, but it can be done. The trick is you're probably going to have to start much sooner. One of the major mistakes that I think a lot of people make is they wait too long to realize this. Right? You're the kingpin. You're the head honcho. You're the patriarch. And you're running your company like crazy. And you wake up and you're 70 years old and wait a second, who's going to succeed me? And you start to get a little frail, a little infirm, and you think around and like, well, who's going to succeed me? And you got to work really hard, really fast to be building a succession plan. But now pull back to 50. Now at 50, if you're bringing people up and you're engaging and you're finding those trustworthy men that are going to work alongside you and you're sharing the vision and then you're systematically handing those things over, that's going to be the pathway to what you want. That's going to be the pathway to where you become the honored elder rather than the worthless old guy. And you got to be intentional about it. So I have other thoughts in other podcasts I'll talk about. I have a podcast I've been sitting on for a long time called just basically The Phases of Life. The preview of that is just simply there are different phases of life. And if you'll envision these phases and what's necessary for each phase, then I think you'll be much more successful. I don't want to get too deep into it, but the short version is one of the problems that we have right now, or that we've had, that I've been fighting against for years, is we only have a phase of life as relates to money. And that phase of life, the way that we talk about it, usually relates to kind of the phi number. When do you reach retirement? And this has led people to this single-minded thing where you might spend decades of your life pursuing financial independence, only to reach financial independence and say, well, now what? And this leads to a very uninteresting life. It's just boring. Whereas if you recognize, wait a second, what is there's a phase of exploration, right? When you're young, we're expecting you to learn and to explore. Then there's a phase of family formation. It's really best to get married at 23. It really is. If you do it earlier or do it later, you wind up with various problems, but 23 is magical. But that means that if you know that's what you're working towards, then your teens are different. If you do things in the wrong order, then you wind up with subpar results. Now we all have to walk our own pathway, but there's a family formation. Then you want to have babies. And there's a point in life in which having babies is really, really key. And if you swap out having babies for building businesses, then, hey, again, I don't like to be judgmental, but it just seems like a foolish thing because you can do that. So have the babies. Then you get into the phase where you're building businesses. But guess what? Building businesses should only be for a short period, for a temporary period of time, 2 or 3 decades. And then some of those people who are building businesses need to go on and be politicians, need to be village elders. There needs to be that that crossing over to a new phase. And so you want to build up the businesses and you want to install your children at the head of the businesses so that you can go and be an elder at the city gates, so that you can go and be a statesman. And there's a whole lot of people right now in our society who are missing these various phases. And when you miss the phases and you don't know what you're working at, and you don't know what the point of this phase is, then you wind up with subpar results. But if you are granted and blessed with a long life, you can do all these things. You can have all of them. But if you just if you neglect that there will be different phases at different times, then things are it doesn't work out as well. So ask yourself, where are you at this phase, and what's the appropriate thing for a person in this phase? And I know we've gotten so bad at talking about this that I try not to spend much time like making caveats, but we've gotten so bad at talking about this that it's just not a natural part of it. But imagine that you're coaching someone, and you're coaching someone who is aspires to be an NFL player, right? What are you going to say to that person? You're going to say to that person, there's phases in life, and here, if you're going to be on the NFL track, then here's what you should expect to be seeing during high school. And here's what you should expect to be in college. And here's what you should expect after college. And if you're not meeting these milestones, then you're probably not going to reach your ambition of being in the NFL. And then after you've been in the NFL, what are the pathways that are open to you? Well, here are the next pathways that are open to you. And here's where you go from there. And here's how you know when you move right for coaching. And here's when you know you're right to move into a commentator. And the most successful people are the people who understand these pathways and engage in them. The lack of success comes when you don't understand where you are. When you're an old guy who should have retired a couple of years ago, but you're just still hanging on, and you wind up doing something poor for your team because you're just determined to hang on instead of gracefully stepping out into retirement. And so life is like that. This is why we need elders to kind of inform us. Say, all right, you're in that 5-year window. In the next 5 years, you probably should step back from being an active player, and you might want to take a couple of years off and move into a role of a coach or a commentator. And here's how you'll know when it's time for you to hang it up and no longer put on the journey as a starter. And here's how you know when you should gracefully go on to the next phase. Those are the kinds of things that are important. But most of us we're not going to go in the NFL. But yet life is like that. We need to understand these phases. Anyway, we'll save that speech for another time. The last thing I want to tell you is the big, intense thing for me that has changed. One of the biggest regrets that I have from when I was younger is having always lived conservatively. I don't know why, but I consider that my biggest mistake. I've always lived conservatively. And what happens is when you live conservatively, and I'll define that in a moment, it's hard to find the limits of your ability. And life is boring when you're not on the limits of your ability. But if you pull back a little bit from being conservative and you push yourself to the limits of your ability, life is fun. I have found I am living right now on the razor edge of the limits of my ability. It's hard. It's really, really hard. But it's also really engaging. I'm more engaged with life than I have been for years. And a lot of that experience has come from basically walking away from conservative thinking. Let me define conservative thinking. Conservative thinking is where you are always taking the safe path, and you're recognizing, you know what, there's something that could happen here, and something that could happen here, and if I don't make it, then that would be a real problem. And you never find the limit. So let me just tell you a couple of examples that inspire me. And this is one of the things that I love most about my country, right? The United States of America, is that we have built a system in which we are happy to take care of risk takers. And we are quick to grant forgiveness. And you can do things differently. One of my heroes that I always use on this is Dan Sullivan, right? The entrepreneur's coach, strategic coach. Dan tells a story about how back, I think in the 80s, he got divorced and he went bankrupt on the same day. As he tells the story, told it to me years ago, he went to court in the morning and he filed for divorce. Then he went out to lunch, paid lunch on a credit card, and then he went to bankruptcy court in the afternoon and he went bankrupt. The lesson that he took from that was that he was dumb and he had done some dumb things and he had to reinvent his philosophy. He's like, well, clearly that didn't work, right? That path that I went on didn't work. And he started out from that position. Today, Dan is one of the world's most respected coaches for entrepreneurs, who has more kind of high-income entrepreneurs coming to him for wisdom than anybody else I know of in the world. And yet, here's the guy who was divorced and bankrupt on the same day. That's the kind of turnaround that our culture can embrace. And that's the kind of thing that can happen. I sometimes see this with President Trump. Here's a guy who, by all accounts, is one of the greatest failures of all time. Multiple businesses have gone bankrupt. Multiple marriages have ended in divorce. Has endured constant conflict. Convicted felon. Just nonstop chaos. And yet he is simultaneously also one of the most admired, most loved, most lauded men. He is the most powerful man in the world, even in the wake of all that failure. And you think, what on earth? What gives a man this bulletproof mentality where he just keeps on pressing forward? He's incredibly inspiring in the way that he just presses forward. I would have given up a bazillion times already. I don't have anywhere near the hardcore attitude that he has. He just presses forward. And yet, is his life boring? Like, again, there's another podcast that I'm not doing today, but I probably should do at some point. I think President Trump and his example is almost the perfect paragon of living a meaningful and impactful life. Would you respect him more if he had just said, well, let me just sit here and drink beer on the beach and, live the pura vida lifestyle and hang out and yeah, man, let's just hang out on the beach? Or do you respect a man who's in the thick of it, fighting for something that he believes needs to be fought for? I respect a man who's in the arena, not the one who just sits out on the side and drinks beer on the beach. I respect the man who's in the arena. And I think that being in the arena, engaging in the fight with appropriate rests and respite is the pathway to satisfaction, to living a satisfying life. Here's just one more. I saw this today. This was a quote from this is from Richard Hanania. He wrote an article about why the MAGA movement is corrupt. Here's a quote. Conservative operatives Jacob Wohl and Jack Berkman, who themselves pleaded guilty to felony telecommunications fraud in 2022, were paid $960,000 in the second quarter to lobby for a pardon for a former nursing home operator who pleaded guilty to defrauding the government of $38 million. Trump pardoned the man, Joseph Schwartz, last month. Now, here's the quote from my online friend, VB Knives. Interesting to consider that there are certain life tracks where one ends up being a felon who is paid about $1 million a year to lobby for presidential pardons. Isn't that astonishing? Now, I'm using these extreme examples, which are undoubtedly triggering for you, but I'm using these extreme examples to say this can all work out. It can all work out. And so, why did I become Mr. Conservative at 25 years old instead of going for it? And what I have resolved is to go for it. In my life, I'm going to be a man who goes for it. And that means that I will probably fail at the things that I go for. And that's okay, because I would rather fail, flat out, egg on my face, fail, and be lying on my deathbed knowing that I tried, rather than to succeed, as I have done in some things, and lying on my deathbed knowing that I probably had more in me. The pain of regret is, for me, a more acute pain than the pain of failure. And we're living in a society in which it's basically impossible to fail. If you go bankrupt, we can rebuild. If you go to prison, you can rebuild. Most of our heroes have spent time in prison. Many of our heroes have spent time completely broke. And yet those were not the things that caused them to be they're not the mortal wound. Now, I don't want to go bankrupt. I don't want to go prison. I don't want to be divorced. I want to avoid those things. And so I think prudence is key. Don't take me too far. I want to be prudent. I want to make wise decisions. And I want to avoid those outcomes. But when I go to sleep at night, I want to go to sleep tired from having tried. I don't want to go to sleep at night bored. And I think you're probably a little bit like me. So whatever it is that is engaging to you, whatever it is that leads you to have a bigger future, whatever it is that causes you to be able to build a future that is bigger than your past, which is probably going to be working on solving some problems that you think should be solved in the world. Try to engage with that and think about it and see if this year you can move in that direction. Because it's exciting. And if you are fortunate enough to have some people around who love you and who respect you, you don't need many, but you do need some, and who will pick you up when you fall down, and he'll pick you up when you're in battle and place you upon your shield and carry you home, then friend, there's probably nothing you can't accomplish. And living on the edge is exciting. It's fun. Razor edge, it's not quite as fun. Being in that max capacity all the time is not quite as fun. But living out on the edge where you know I'm at the edge of my ability and I've got to get better, that's growth and that's exciting. And that's a goal that as you accomplish it, it prepares you for more. And I have found this to be a useful mindset. If it's useful to you, I hope that you will take it. I hope that you have an amazing year. Let me close with that famous quote. By the way, remember that I have the whole speech in the archives. I will link to it in the show notes because I get annoyed why only this quote is said of that speech that Teddy Roosevelt gave at the Sorbonne in Paris. I think the whole speech is good. That's why I recorded the whole speech for you, and I'll link to that. But the quote is worth listening to and reminding ourselves of again and again. It is not the critic who counts. Not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who, at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. Happy New Year. Make it a great one. Make it one to remember.